Okay, so I found an interesting video from Sam Harris where he talks about the meaning of life, or in my opinion, avoids talking about the meaning of life. I think it's an informative and enlightening clip, but perhaps not in the way Sam Harris intended. He's on the podcast with Lex Fridman, who's an AI researcher and a podcast host, very, very popular. Joe Rogan really likes him because he's into martial arts.
Okay.
Let me ask you the last question. Without any serving it up, without any explanation, what is the meaning of life?
I think it's either the wrong question or that question is answered by paying sufficient attention to any present moment such that there's no basis upon which to pose that question. It's not answered in the usual way. It's not a matter of having more information. It's having more engagement with reality as it is in the present moment, or consciousness as it is in the present moment. You don't ask that.
Pause it for a second. So he's saying, he's asked, without dressing it up, in any way, just give it to me straight. What is the meaning of life?
I mean, to his credit, he did, didn't he?
Well, he said, no,
he gave his opinion on how you should address it straight up. He didn't mince his words.
Right. He says it's either the wrong question. I don't understand how that can be the wrong question. When people say the meaning of life, they mean what is the purpose of life, essentially. Right? What is the purpose of life? Either that's the wrong question, or you should live your life with sufficient engagement with the present moment so that it doesn't even arise.
Yeah, because the questions of purpose and meaning only arise when you're not, completely absorbed in the sensory experience of daily living.
Yeah.
Which anybody past about the age of 7 usually gets past, I think. About past the age of 7, you're like, okay, I've done this before, right? I walk over there, I'll eat something, which is great, it tastes nice, and there's a bit of a sensory experience there, but they're not like wowed by it at every moment. So basically what he's saying is that you need to regress your brain, okay, to a condition whereby you are like a less than a 7-year-old. Because when you have a newborn baby, you know kids. I've got kids, right? Inshallah, one day. All right. When you have a kid, you've seen my kids,
my
exactly.
niece and nephew.
So, and you've seen other kids perhaps in your life as well. And newborn babies, when you see them for the first time, I'm just going off on one just after 46 seconds. But anyway,
it's our podcast.
You don't do that. So after, when you see a newborn baby, there comes a point at like 4 or 5 weeks, pretty young, okay, when they suddenly realize that they have hands. Isn't that true? It's true, right? It's true, isn't it? It's true, yeah. They suddenly realize that they've got hands, and they're literally like... and then like a bit later, they realize they've got feet. And they just get obsessed with their feet. And they're like sticking their feet in their mouths, and they're like hitting their feet, and they're like hitting everything with it. And, successively over the course of their life, they realize, I've got this, I've got that, I can do this, I can do that.
Well, then it's more external. I can encounter this, experience that.
Yeah, but simple things then become hilarious. That's like the childhood when you're a burp is like hilarious. Like you burp is like absolutely hilarious. But seriously, and this is basically what he's saying.
Yeah.
You need to be so enamored like a child from the present sensory moment that the issues of future consequence of your actions and of what you're doing here and what's the overarching purpose and meaning, they don't even arise. That's what I've taken away from those 46 seconds.
Well, we do have 8 minutes left, or 9 if you actually could do arithmetic.
I don't think there's any point in watching the rest.
No, I think
it's done.
Let's see it.
All right, guys, that's it. And we will see you.
Let's see how we got to be fair. Let's see how it substantiates it.
Okay, just put it on 1.75 there.
No. This is good. This is
okay. Fine.
Question: when you're most captivated by the most important thing you ever pay attention to. That question only gets asked.
He's looking at his hands as well.
When you're abstracted away from that experience, that peak experience, and you're left wondering, why are so many of my other experiences mediocre, right? Like, why am I repeating the same pleasures every day? Why is my Netflix queue just like, when's this going to run out? Like, I've seen so many shows like this. Am I really going to watch another one? Like, all of that, that's a moment where you're not actually having the beatific vision, right? You're not sunk into the present moment, and you're not truly in love. Like, you're in a relationship with somebody who this is the person you're living your life with, but you don't actually feel good together, right? Like it's like it's in those moments of where attention hasn't found a good enough reason to truly sink into the present, so as to obviate any concern like that, right? And I mean, that's why meditation is this kind of superpower, because until you learn to meditate, you think the outside world or the circumstances of your life always have to get arranged so that the present moment can become good enough to demand your attention in a way that seems fulfilling, that makes you happy. And so if it's jujitsu, you think, okay, I got to get back on the mat. It's been months since I've trained. It's been over a year since I've trained. It's COVID. When am I going to be able to train again? That's the only place I feel great, right? Or I've got a ton of work to do. I'm not going to be able to feel good until I get all this work done, right? So I've got some deadline that's coming. You always think that your life has to change, the world has to change, so that you can finally have a good enough excuse to truly to just be here, and here is enough. That where the present moment becomes totally captivating. Meditation is meditation is another name for the discovery that you can actually just train yourself to do that on demand. So that just looking at a cup can be good enough in precisely that way, and any sense that it might not be is recognized to be a thought that is mysteriously unravels the moment you notice it, and you fall, and the moment expands and becomes more diaphanous, and then there's no.
I need to look that up. Diaphanous.
This might hold the key.
I spelt it almost correct. I got an E instead of an A, but give it to me. Light, delicate, translucent. So the moment has to be light, delicate, and translucent. Let's continue.
That this isn't the best moment of your life, right? Like this, it doesn't. And again, it doesn't have to be.
Is he still talking about looking at a cup? Okay, can we pause it? There is. Okay, where to begin? So he is saying. So he firstly started by saying that people are under the impression that you have to arrange the things in your external affairs in such a way that you can have contentment and fulfillment, right? And he says this is a fallacy. This is wrong. And what you should do is you should train yourself so that you can internally generate a sense of contentment by actually looking at a cup, right? You can basically generate that feeling of pure engagement by looking at a cup, okay? And I guess he's saying this in the context of, if the question of the purpose and the meaning of life is coming up, it means that you're not engaging in the present moment sufficiently.
In the cup,
which essentially means that he's saying that, effectively he's saying then the purpose of your life is to engage in your life. Is to engage with the present moment in such a way that you are able to derive maximum contentment from that present moment. So that is the purpose of your life. So basically that means the purpose of your life is to live mindfully and to be engaged in activities with full concentration. So the purpose of your life is concentration.
Correct. Why?
Well,
you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of a verse of the Quran. And things do generally sometimes. Mm-hmm. And this is one particular example. Chapter 95, verse 5 to 6. Okay? It says, surely we have created man in the best make. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. Right? And then the very next verse says, ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. Then if he works iniquity, we reject him as the lowest of the low. To subjugate the human mind, the pinnacle from what we understand of consciousness, whether it be in the brain or the seat of the soul or whatever it be, the human consciousness, the human attention, the ability to concentrate, to subjugate that to seeking pleasure from the shape, light, color, weight, texture of a material object, is to actually reduce your consciousness to that of a material object.
Yeah, because you fill it to the brim with the
material object.
With
That's actually what he is advocating for. It's basically a lowering of the bar for enjoyment in life to such a degree that everything becomes enjoyable, such that you do not have to pay attention to the pain in your life.
So it's a mental lobotomy.
It's a mental lobotomy.
I think let's go on. But that does seem to be what he's saying. He's
exactly what he's saying.
He's saying give yourself a mental lobotomy such that you have such engagement through concentration that any form is enough to fill your cup.
Correct. That's a pun if I ever heard it. But yes, okay. Basically. Let's keep going.
This tastes like chocolate. This is the most chocolatey moment of my life. No, it's just the sense data don't have to change, but the sense that there is some kind of basis for doubt about the rightness of being in the world in this moment, that can evaporate when you pay attention. And
you can say diaphanous again.
That is the meaning. So
I have to keep a dictionary open.
The meaning of life for me is to live in that mode more and more, and to, whenever I notice I'm not in that mode, to recognize it and return, and to not be to to cease more and more to take.
How did he even get to the studio in that mode? He must have been...
Because we all have reasons why we can't be fulfilled in this moment. It's like I've got all these outstanding things that I'm worried about, right? It's like there's that thing that's happening later today that I'm anxious about. Whatever it is, we're constantly deferring our sense of this is it. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is the show. We keep deferring it. And
can we stop there?
No. Okay, fine.
I just want to make the point. I mean, if the first caveman had taken that particular perspective, we'd all be cavemen. All right. And that is exactly what he is in his lovely studio with his $1 million book deals. Okay. With going on all these fancy podcasts, getting millions of views. It's a very privileged position to say from that perspective, you need to be happy with your lot in life to such an extent that you're happy staring at a cup. Okay? Or you're happy enjoying a little bit of chocolate. It's basically a philosophical justification of saying, look, okay, mate, you just sit down, be quiet, don't make too much noise. And
he can be used to that. I'm not sure he's advocating for that.
He is effectively.
I mean, he's advocating to torture, so it certainly wouldn't be the most the worst thing he's advocated. But it's also his own lifestyle contradicts that, because this is a guy who's clearly got goals in life and goals which are worldly and which are to do with what he thinks is meaningful. What he thinks is meaningful is spreading his philosophy, his ideology.
Otherwise, why is he doing this? How did he even get to the studio with all that those bombarded diaphanous experiences along the way? Oh, the light on the street and the shimmer from the glass. Well, I must be captivated in the moment.
You only do things that actually you find that help to serve your goals, which is what he's admitting here.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's come onto these podcasts, he's writing these books, indicates that he cannot live completely engrossed in the present moment and have that fulfilling him.
No.
So he's actually, his own lifestyle contradicts. It shows that he doesn't have any conviction, at least, in what he's saying. Because if he had conviction, he would
deals and just go and live a normal ascetic life up a mountain somewhere.
Unless he's saying then there's some kind of other motivation apart from contentment that's driving him to do those things, which is obviously not true, because people do what makes them content, and they rarely expend huge amounts of effort doing more than that. So I think he's contradicting himself here, and I think that shows that what he's saying should not be trusted, because the practitioner himself doesn't really practice it. Or the advocate.
Interesting point.
These moments on the calendar where we think, okay, this is where it's all going to land. Is that vacation I planned with my 5 best friends? We do this once every 3 years, and now we're going, and here we are on the beach together. Unless you have a mind that can really pay attention, really cut through the chatter, really sink into the present moment, you can't even enjoy those moments the way they should be enjoyed, the way you dreamed you would enjoy them when they arrive. So meditation, in the sense, it's the great equalizer. It's like you don't have to live with the illusion anymore that you need a good enough reason, and that things are going to get better when you do have those good reasons. It's like there's just a mirage-like quality to every future attainment and every future breakthrough and every future peak experience, that eventually you get the lesson that you never quite arrive. Right? Like you don't arrive.
He said bitterly,
to step over the present moment in search of the next thing.
It doesn't do it.
I mean, we're constantly we're stepping over the thing that we think we're seeking in the act of seeking it, and so it is kind of a paradox.
Okay, pause it.
I gotta get in there, man.
Yeah.
So again, reminds me of another 2 verses of the Quran, chapter 24, verse 40. As to those who disbelieve, their deeds are like a mirage in a desert. Exactly what he said. He's experienced this experience many times. He's just come to the wrong conclusion afterwards. As to those who disbelieve, their deeds are like a mirage in a desert. The thirsty one thinks it to be water until, when he comes up to it, he finds it to be nothing. And he finds Allah near him, who then fully pays him his account. And Allah is swift at reckoning. The second verse it reminded me of was chapter 20, verse 15. This is a really, really simple, and you'll know the verse very easily. Verily is in the remembrance of Allah that hearts find comfort. That's not chapter 20, verse 15, it's a different verse. But verily in the remembrance of Allah does the heart find comfort. And I'll get you that reference in a minute. Tell me about what you think those 2 verses have to do with that.
That's it. I was just thinking about that, because I was thinking in the life of a believer, and from a theistic perspective, and we're Ahmadi Muslims, mine is the opposite, where actually if you align your life correctly, everything can have meaning, because behind all of your actions, ultimately you're trying to dedicate yourself to God with all of your actions, be it your job, be it a relationship with friends, be it a relationship with family, partners, and wives, children, etc. Right? Ultimately, all of these things you're doing in a context that will where you're obeying God's laws, and you're living your life in a way that helps to spiritually uplift yourself and others around you, right? So everything actually has meaning, like even the smallest thing. Like there are those hadith, the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he said even putting like food in the mouth of, I think, your wife, brings with it huge reward.
Yeah. Chapter 4, verse 125. But whoso does good works, whether male or female, and is a believer, shall enter heaven, and shall not be wronged even as much as the little hollow in the back of a date stone.
Which means even the tiniest good thing that they did will be rewarded and recognized. And everything can become meaningful. Because it's like, even if you're going through different struggles, you're going through these struggles for the sake of God, and you're being steadfast, and you're making the best out of your potentially bad situation. And it reminded me of the hadith where the Prophet said, Prophet peace be upon him of Islam said, this world is he said wondrous is the case of a believer. Wondrous is the case of a believer. If he comes across something which is good, then he is grateful for it, and that is good for him. And if he comes across something which causes him some suffering, then he is steadfast through that suffering, and that is also good for him.
Yeah, he earns God's pleasure from that.
Yeah, so in every situation, you can be either grateful or steadfast, and really grateful for all of it in a way. And you can actually have God's pleasure because of that.
So what you're saying is that just by the way, chapter 13, verse 27 to 28 is what I mentioned earlier. Verily, it is in the remembrance of Allah that hearts find comfort.
Yeah.
So what you're really saying is that he's describing the complete antithesis of your experience of life, literally the negative.
Yeah.
Literally the
He's saying everything I do
is meaningless.
And
I
even
have
things
to
that are supposed to
invest
be.
it with meaning.
Invent it. Invent the meaning.
It. He has to invent the meaning in the moment by applying to it and deriving from it a sensory experience that provides him some degree of contentment, whereby he has to effectively shut out. What he's doing is, in all of these moments where the invasion of the thought comes to mind that this is all meaningless, this is all meaningless, this is all meaningless, he has to force it out of his mind.
Yeah.
Okay? He has to force that out of his mind and be able to experience the sensory pleasure of that particular moment. And that is what enables him to find comfort, which is effectively the lobotomization of himself. Whereas what you're saying is that every moment is invested and imbued with meaning.
Yeah.
Because you know that you will see the fruits of it and the result of it every moment.
Yeah.
With God.
And God is watching, God is swift at reckoning as well.
Absolutely.
But why is it meaningless? Like, can you explain a little bit about the context of, say, a theistic outlook and our outlook versus his outlook of matter, energy, and the laws of nature? Why are you saying that everything he does is by his own? We don't believe it's meaningless.
We don't believe his life is meaningless.
Not at all.
Life is extremely meaningful.
Yeah, but why would he come to that conclusion?
Because he's the accidental byproduct of an accidental universe. And all of his actions, at some point in the future, there will come a moment at some point in the future after his death, right? Whereby the world would not have been any different whether he had been alive or dead from a material standpoint.
Yeah.
Right? Now, for the great men of society, it'll be that might be at the end of human civilization, because the human civilization will always bear the mark of some human beings, no matter how long ago they lived. Abraham, peace be upon him, is 4,000 years ago. He's still having an effect upon people's lives. And in fact, if you look at the people who make the greatest impact, it's the prophets of God.
Yeah.
Okay, so Michael H. Hart,
not new atheist,
not new
horsemen.
atheist pundits. Yeah.
No, okay.
Michael H. Hart wrote the book The 100, the greatest men of all time, and he ranked the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as the number one, and he ranked Jesus as number two, most influential human beings of all time. So, for such great men, their worldly impact will last as long as the world exists, and there are men to remember them, men and women to remember them. Sam Harris might be. Well, I don't want to speculate, but there will come a point whereby it will not have mattered whether he lived or died. And if you only believe in a worldly existence to life, right, then it effectively renders your life pretty meaningless pretty rapidly. And for most people, that effect is like 10 or 15 years. For most people,
the people that they love.
So it might be up to their grandchildren. That's correct. Yeah. But even then, for their grandchildren, if those grandparents had been supplanted by other grandparents, That's the reality. I mean, for most grandparents,
and when the Earth collides and when crash into the sun or whatever.
That's for everybody. But I mean, even within a few generations, for most people, it's as if they had never lived. And so, this is the problem he's facing. It's effectively an existential crisis he experiences walking down the road every day.
Yeah.
Right.
Every time someone gives us a cup of tea, not this again.
But for us, and for believers in general, I think there is a truly diaphanous moment, around the corner every day, because every single day you experience things whereby you are able to appreciate God's beauty more. And you recognize that every day is a fresh opportunity to seek the blessings of God and to progress in one's moral condition. And so for a believer, even if he lived on a mountainside for the rest of his life, all of those moments would be kept for God, by God. All of those moments would be recognized by God, and he will see the outcomes, and the outcomes of them will play out throughout eternity in the afterlife.
Yeah.
So, if they are a believer, if they are a person who does good deeds, loves God, and has a good relationship with God's creation, then they will see the fruitful outcomes of their actions for the rest of their existence. So every moment is imbued with extensive and infinite meaning. But for him, it's imbued with extensive and infinite despair.
It's interesting how you're kind of what you think is ultimate reality, which for him is essentially nothingness. In fact, he believes in a universe coming from nothing.
Yeah.
Infects and overtakes everything. So we believe in God, who is the ultimate reality that can overpower every moment, essentially. Whereas for him, nothingness overpowers every moment.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's very interesting, and it also reminded me of a quote of the Promised Messiah, the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, where he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, a pauper in his hut can be much happier than a king in his palace, right? If he is a believer in God and the other isn't, because of someone who's truly righteous and has a relationship with God, that relationship will sustain him through everything, and every act that he does can be meaningful to his soul and to the souls of those around him, and ultimately in this life and in the next life. Yeah. Whereas the king in his palace, who is simply trying to give himself as many diaphanous sensory moments as possible, is going to run out of things down there, and he can only encounter so much distraction.
That's exactly what it is. He's trying to distract himself.
In psychology, these are distraction techniques so that you don't self-harm. Right?
Really?
Yeah, this is which I've always. Okay, well, they may have some utility, but for you as an existential way of life, huh?
You don't teach them to your patients.
Whatever works. But in terms of as an existential mode of being, a distraction technique to stop self-harm of your actual thinking, is not recommended as plan A, I think, in life.
Yeah, that's his modus operandi, it seems. Yeah. Do we want to watch the rest?
Yeah, let's
be fair to him. Give him the rest of it.
I mean, there's this paradox which, I mean, it sounds trite, but it's like you can't actually become happy. You can only be happy, and it's the illusion that it's the illusion that your future being happy can be predicated on this act of becoming in any domain. And becoming includes this sort of further scientific understanding on the questions that interest you, or getting in better shape, or whatever the thing is, whatever the contingency of your dissatisfaction seems to be in any present moment. Real attention solves the koan, in a way that becomes a very different place from which to then make any further change. It's not that you just have to dissolve into a puddle of goo. I mean, you can still get in shape, and you can still do all the things that, the superficial things that are obviously good to do. But the sense that your well-being is over there is really does diminish, and eventually just becomes a kind of non sequitur. So,
well, there's a sense in which, in this conversation, I've actually experienced many of those things, in the sense that I've arrived. So I mentioned to you offline, it's very true that I've been a fan of yours for many years. And the reason I started this podcast, speaking of AI systems, is to manipulate you, Sam Harris, into doing this conversation. So like on the calendar, literally, I've always had a sense, people ask me, when are you going to talk to Sam Harris? And I always answered eventually, right? Because I always felt, again, tying our free will thing, that somehow that's going to happen. And it's one of those manifestation things or something. I don't know if maybe I am a robot. I'm just not cognizant of it.
Okay, he's going off the deep end.
Okay, we can cut it out. I think it was the end of the video.
So, but that's interesting because he kind of, well.
You go first. You go first.
You sure? No.
Yeah, you go first. You go first.
Well, it seems like Lex.
I'm sure you'll produce a diaphanous experience for me.
I just had a diaphany actually.
Is that a thing? Diaphany.
No, it was a pun.
And it is a diaphany.
Oh, really?
Diaphany's a word, yeah.
No one cares about this. So the thing which struck me about Lex is that he seems to have completely not understood what Sam was saying.
Yeah, he does.
He doesn't understand.
He's like, yeah, I made this chart and I was looking forward to this day and I was working towards it. No! Sam's like, no!
Because, yeah, he's saying, you coming here is a material thing. It's a worldly thing, which has given me happiness. Why? Because it has meaning to me. It has meaning because I this is speculation, but probably something like, I see Sam Harris as a very wise, intelligent person who's done a really good podcast, and I seek to emulate him by putting out what little I know in the world into the world. And maybe one day it'll be of such good worth that someone like Sam Harris can come onto my show, right? So it's meaningful to him because it's in the context. It brings him happiness because it's got meaning in his context.
Yeah.
Because he's normal. That's how most people live.
Is he about to say that then I realised that this is actually a mirage and I shouldn't actually have looked forward to you coming here?
Well, the only way he could actually...
Is that how he's going to end it? Is that what we're missing out in the next minute?
No, I think the only way he can actually agree with Sam now is to recognise that this is a mirage, and I've experienced this by the fact that this has not given me any kind of sense of contentment or happiness, you being here. I wish you hadn't come, quite honestly. Because he's basically, he's shown also that what Sam has said is kind of incomprehensible unless you're stopping and thinking about it every 5 seconds, like we have been. Because he didn't seem to have taken that in. Sam is saying, don't rely on worldly things to give you happiness. Which
is an important lesson.
Which is important because he's experienced it.
But his answer to that is dive further into the worldly experience.
Yeah.
His answer isn't recognize that actually fundamentally there must be more than this and I should seek out something higher consciousness beyond this.
Yeah.
It's his answer is reduce your consciousness, put a reducing valve, put a high pass noise filter on your consciousness, cut out all the high thoughts, okay?
Yeah.
And reduce yourself to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
I mean, are you finished? Do you want to?
Yeah.
I mean, what struck me is that he starts talking about happiness. The question wasn't about happiness. Sam Harris has made a rookie philosophical mistake here. Okay. Purpose and happiness are two separate things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Completely separate things. Right? So I think that's also part of the problem is that he starts talking about what makes you happy.
Yeah.
That's not the issue here because, there's a difference between being pleased and happy and laughful, joyful and everything. Okay.
Yeah.
And, which comes out of the kind of superficiality of life and the superficial moments of life and having long-term contentment and
being fulfilled.
And he's kind of talking about both simultaneously and mixing them together. So he's not actually using his words very precisely. I suspect what he's talking about is long-term contentment rather than happiness.
Right.
But at the same time, is he really going to get really content from looking at a cup?
I doubt it. But they can be linked, but they can only be linked in a theistic context. Because it would make sense that God created you in such a way that by fulfilling your meaning, that is how you become content and therefore become happy in a loose sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's also a sense that people, there's a stage in Islam known as Mohsiniyat. So when you're a Mohsin, it's characterized, according to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, by a condition whereby, and the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community wrote about this at length, Hazim Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be on him, which is that when you, and it's similar to what you said earlier about wondrous is the case of a believer, steadfastness and gratitude. But it's more than that. It's that when God applies to you a trial or a difficulty or worldly suffering or something other people would be upset with, the death of a loved one, a loss of your job, a loss of a meaningful opportunity to you, that the person turns to in gratitude to God. Do you see? Because the person recognizes that this is an opportunity for me to attain nearness to God. And because they value that above all worldly pleasures and suffering, they actually become pleased with the opportunity to suffer for the sake of God. And that's obviously a condition in which a person transcends worldly pleasure and pain at the more cerebral and higher level entirely.
Yeah. And it strikes me that Islam is not something which tells you to it's not like we're saying that Sam just says indulge in, go completely into the world, and we say go completely into God, in the sense of you completely disconnect from the world and don't have any kind of sensory perceptions and don't engage with the world at all, which is a kind of late Buddhist type idea of asceticism, and you shut off yourself from the world, like a yogi, right?
Yeah.
Islam is live in the world completely live in the world, be in the world, but not of the world.
Yeah,
as the saying goes.
Yeah.
I.e.,
be a ship which is on the water, in contact with the water, but above it.
Yeah, and if you look at all the prophets, they were people who were in the world, and they were constantly helping other people and engaging with all their difficulties.
Yeah.
And spending so much time helping people, even doing what we would consider mundane things.
Yes.
But actually, it was terrifically meaningful. Because what they were doing was actually helping people in their real lives. They weren't such as to go and hide away for all of their lives. They may have spent periods in isolation where they were concentrating on prayers. But if you look at their whole lives, they were engaged in the world. And Islam as such tells you to use all of your capacities, but to direct them in a productive manner and do everything with the knowledge that everything you do, if done in a certain way, can win the pleasure of God and further your relationship with God, and is therefore incredibly meaningful. Even the smallest thing, even picking up litter, is described as a good deed. By the Prophet
smallest
Muhammad,
good deed is to remove an obstruction on the way of.
So if I see a cup on the floor, right, as I'm walking, that can grab my attention, and I can thank God for this opportunity, and I can put it in the bin, and that becomes a meaningful moment for me.
Yeah.
Right, but it becomes meaningful because the context, the context in which I live, the spiritual context that I have. Whereas for him, he sees the cup and he sees another chance for distraction away from my these pesky thoughts of what should I do, or how should I live. Let me generate that through meditation, where I can focus on that and thereby quell all the thoughts that I'm having that are disquieting my soul.
Yeah, I think it's quite depressing, actually.
Yeah,
I think I might Anyway, very depressing. It is depressing.
Yeah,
it's depressing that is his experience of life. That is a pretty depressing.
I think we should,
both of them. I mean,
well, I don't know. So I mean, I don't think Lex is the same, but
he seems to be lauding him quite significantly.
Let's see how it finishes.
Let's
see if Sam
let's finish on this.
Let's see if Sam corrects him.
I don't know what the purpose of my life past this point is. So if I've arrived. So in that sense, I mean, all of that to say, I'm only partially joking on that. It really is a huge honor that you would waste this time with me.
Yeah. Well,
it really means a lot.
Listen, it's mutual. I'm a big fan of yours, and as you know, I reached out to you for this. So this is it's great. I love what you're doing. You're doing something more and more indispensable in this world on your podcast, and you're doing it differently than Rogan's doing it or than I'm doing it. I mean, you definitely found your own lane, and it's wonderful.
Okay, so all of that just completely debunked everything.
How is
you
it
just
indispensable?
said earlier.
Yeah. Say indispensable means you cannot live without it.
Well, I mean,
it's providing so much meaning to the world.
How could it be an honor to meet him when it's fundamentally you should be able to drive every moment have the same meaning as every other moment. There should be no question of meaning from one aspect to another.
Yeah,
and
maybe Sam is his meditation needs a bit of brushing up on.
Yeah, it might be true.
Okay, next video.